It had been one of those days that drained the life right out of you. Long, demanding, and heavy with the kind of weariness that no amount of coffee can fix. The kind of day where every little thing feels just a bit harder than it should. Work had been relentless, a storm of noise, numbers, and tension that seemed to hang in the air. By the time the afternoon sun began its slow descent, I felt spent, like I'd left a piece of myself somewhere back in the noise of that factory. The drive home was always my favorite part of the day. Out here, in the quiet stretches of rural America, the world still moved at its own pace. The two-lane road wound through open fields and patches of wild grass, past weathered barns and wooden fences that had seen better years. The sky was wide and golden, the kind of light that softens everything it touches. The kind that reminds you, even on the hardest days, that beauty can exist in the background of exhaustion. The truck hummed steadily beneath me, the tires crunching over loose gravel. I rolled the windows halfway down, letting in the smell of warm dust and distant pine. The radio stayed off. I'd had enough noise for one day. I just wanted the hum of the road, the rhythm of the engine, and a little space to breathe. I remember feeling that familiar dull ache in my shoulders, the kind that comes from too many hours on your feet and too much weight on your mind. Bills, repairs, deadlines. The quiet felt good, comforting even. I was thinking about dinner, maybe a cold beer, maybe just sitting out on the porch for a bit before the sun went down. Simple things. That's all I wanted. Then, just as the road curved past an old oak tree I'd driven by 1,000 times, something caught my eye. A flash of movement, small and uneven, near the edge of the ditch on the right side of the road. At first I thought it was nothing. A bird maybe. A rabbit startled by the rumble of my tires. But then I caught another glimpse, something ginger-colored, shifting weakly in the shallow water that had collected after last night's rain. I eased my foot off the gas, squinting through the windshield as I slowed. There it was again, movement, but slow, struggling. I pulled over, my truck coming to a stop with a crunch of gravel. The engine idled softly, and for a moment I just sat there staring. The ditch wasn't deep, just a few feet down, full of muddy water and reeds. But right in the middle of it, half submerged, was something alive. I leaned forward, frowning, my heart giving a strange little jolt when I realized what I was seeing. It was a cat, small, drenched, and caked in mud. A ginger cat, or at least it looked that way beneath all the muck. It was trying to climb out, paws slipping helplessly on the slick mud, every attempt sending it sliding back into the water. There was something desperate about the way it moved, weak, tired, terrified. Without really thinking, I killed the engine and grabbed the handle on the door. The air that hit me was warm and damp, carrying the smell of wet earth. The world outside was quiet except for the faint hum of cicadas and the distant rustle of wind in cornfields. I popped the tailgate open, scanning for anything useful. There, my old hunting boots, still sitting in the corner from the last time I'd gone out months ago. They were dusty and stiff, but I didn't think twice. I tugged them on, muttering under my breath, and stepped off the side of the road toward the ditch. The ground gave way beneath my feet, soft and sticky. By the time I reached the edge of the puddle, my boots were already coated in a thick layer of mud. The cat saw me coming and let out a faint, broken sound, a meow weak and trembling. It wasn't the sound of fear anymore. It was the sound of something that had run out of strength. "Hey there," I said quietly, keeping my voice low and steady. "It's all right. I see you." The cat froze, eyes wide and wild. I could see the whites around them. I could see the way its sides heaved with shallow, panicked breaths. Its fur was plastered to its skin, orange streaks dulled to brown with mud. "Easy now," I murmured, crouching down. "You're okay. I'm gonna get you out." The mud made a sucking sound as I stepped closer. Every move had to be slow, careful, not to splash, not to scare it more than it already was. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly. The cat tried to pull away, a small cry escaping it, but it didn't have the strength to fight. When my fingers brushed its back, I could feel how cold it was, how fragile. "It's okay," I whispered. "I've got you." With one slow, steady motion, I slid my hands under its belly and lifted. The suction of the mud resisted for a second, then gave way with a wet sound that sent ripples across the puddle. The cat came free, limp and shivering, its tiny claws gripping weakly at the air. I held it against my chest, careful not to squeeze too tight. It was lighter than I expected, heartbreakingly light. Back at the truck, I set it down gently on the towel I kept in the back seat. It meowed once, a hoarse little sound that seemed to say everything it couldn't. I turned the air vents toward it, letting the warm air roll over its trembling body. Its breathing was shallow, uneven. I could see the faint rise and fall of its chest, but it wasn't steady. I knew enough to tell it had swallowed some of that dirty water, maybe too much. My stomach clenched. There was a clinic about 15, maybe 20 minutes away in town. I'd passed it before, a small brick building with a faded sign and a mural of dogs and cats painted on the side. I'd never been inside, never really needed to. Until now. I climbed in, started the engine, and turned onto the main road. The tire spun for a second in the mud before catching the gravel again. "Hang in there, little one," I said quietly, glancing at the cat curled on the towel beside me. The sunlight was softer now, filtering through the windshield, turning everything gold. The field stretched wide and endless on both sides, and for the first time all day, I didn't feel tired anymore. I just felt alive and hopeful in a quiet, fragile way that surprised me. The drive into town felt longer than it ever had before. The road, usually so familiar and calm, stretched endlessly ahead of me, each mile heavier than the last. The cat lay curled in the towel on the passenger seat, still trembling, its fur damp and clinging in uneven tufts. Every few seconds I glanced over, checking for the faint rise and fall of its tiny chest. Each breath felt like a small miracle. The sun hung low now, late afternoon spilling across the fields in golden light. It should have been beautiful, that quiet hour when the world starts to wind down, but my chest was tight with worry. My hands gripped the steering wheel harder than they needed to. The smell of mud still clung to the air, mixed with something faintly sour, like the swampy water I'd pulled the cat from. "Just hold on, little one," I muttered, as if saying it aloud might help. The cat didn't move. I kept driving. The closer I got to town, the more the scenery shifted. The wide fields giving way to scattered houses, then to small shops and quiet streets. When I finally saw the old brick building with the faded mural of animals painted on its side, a wave of relief washed through me. Oak Ridge Animal Clinic, the sign read, though the O had long since faded to a dull brown. I pulled into the parking lot and jumped out before the engine had even stopped fully. The air smelled of asphalt and late summer dust. Grabbing the towel-wrapped bundle gently from the seat, I hurried toward the entrance. The bell above the door jingled as I pushed it open. Inside, the place smelled faintly of disinfectant and fur, that clean but lived-in smell of a place that sees both heartbreak and healing every day. A young woman stood behind the counter, her expression shifting the moment she saw what I was carrying. "Oh dear," she said, stepping forward quickly. "What happened?" "I found her stuck in a muddy ditch off County Road 14, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's breathing, but she's cold. Think she might have swallowed some of the water." "Okay," she said, taking the cat carefully from my arms. "You did the right thing bringing her in. We'll take care of her." She turned and disappeared through a swinging door, calling out for help. I caught a glimpse of a man in a white coat moving quickly toward her. The vet, I guessed. And then the door swung closed behind them, leaving me standing there in the quiet reception area, mud still drying on my jeans. There wasn't much to do but wait. I sat down on one of the plastic chairs against the wall. A poster of smiling golden retrievers hung above me, its edges curling with age. Across the room, a woman flipped through a magazine while her small dog panted at her feet, completely unaware of the storm in my chest. I stared at my hands, still streaked with mud, and realized they were shaking. Not from the cold, but from something else. It had all happened so fast. One moment I was driving home, thinking about dinner, and the next I was knee-deep in muck, pulling a half-drowned cat from a ditch. I hadn't even thought about it. I just did it. It made me wonder how many times in my life I'd driven past something, or someone, who needed help too tired or too distracted to notice. After what felt like forever, the vet came out. He was an older man with kind eyes and deep lines around his mouth that looked like they had been carved by years of both smiles and worry. "She's stable," he said, and my heart almost jumped out of my chest. It was touch and go for a bit. She had a lot of swamp water in her lungs, but we've given her fluids and something to help her breathe. She's resting now. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Is she gonna make it?" He smiled a little, the kind of smile that carried cautious hope. "I think so. She's a tough little thing. Probably wouldn't have lasted much longer out there, though. You got to her just in time." Those words, "just in time," hit me harder than I expected. I nodded, swallowing past the tightness in my throat. "Can I see her?" I asked quietly. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Just for a minute." He led me down a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm fur. We stopped by a small room with cages lined along one wall. Inside one of them, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the ginger cat. She looked so much smaller now, clean, fragile, her fur still damp but no longer clinging to her skin. A small tube ran from her leg to a hanging IV bag, and her chest rose and fell in slow, steady rhythm. "She's sedated," the vet explained. "Needs rest more than anything right now. We'll keep her here for a few days to make sure her lungs are clear." I stood there quietly, watching her. There was something about the stillness of that moment, the low hum of machines, the soft light slanting in through the small window, that made everything else fade away. The noise, the exhaustion, the dull weight of daily life, it all disappeared. All that mattered was that she was alive. I reached a hand toward the cage, resting it against the metal bars. "You hang in there, okay?" I whispered. "You made it this far. You're safe now." She didn't move, but I liked to think she could hear me. Before I left, the receptionist handed me a small form to fill out. "We'll call you with any updates," she said with a warm smile. "And thank you for bringing her in. Not everyone would have stopped." I nodded, feeling that lump rise again in my throat. Just doing what anyone should, I guess. But as I walked back to my truck, I wasn't so sure that was true. The world had a way of making people hurry, rush past things, rush past moments, rush past kindness. Maybe most people wouldn't have stopped. Maybe I hadn't stopped enough times before. The drive home felt different. The road hadn't changed. The light was still golden. The air still warm. But something inside me was softer now.
quieter. I caught myself glancing at the empty seat beside me, half expecting to see a tiny, mud-caked bundle breathing softly under that towel. I smiled a little. For the first time all day, the weight in my chest felt lighter.
The next few days passed in that strange, quiet way that follows something meaningful. Life went on, work, routine, the same grind, but everything felt just a little different. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe it was me who had changed, though I didn't realize it yet. The morning after I brought the cat in, I woke earlier than usual. The house was still, the kind of silence that comes just before dawn. I sat by the window with my coffee. The next few days passed in that strange, quiet way that follows something meaningful. Life went on. Work, routine, the same grind. But everything felt just a little different. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe it was me who had changed, though I didn't realize it yet. The morning after I brought the cat in, I woke earlier than usual. The house was still, the kind of silence that comes just before dawn. I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the pale light creep across the fields. I thought about her, that little ginger cat, lying somewhere in a clinic cage, wrapped in a blanket and hooked up to tubes. I wondered if she was scared. I wondered if she remembered the sound of my voice. I told myself not to get attached, that I'd done my part. But the truth is, I couldn't stop thinking about her. There was something about the look in her eyes when I'd found her, that mixture of fear and hope, that kept replaying in my mind. It wasn't just an animal I'd pulled from the mud. It felt like something more, something fragile and alive that reminded me how easily things, lives, moments, hope itself could slip away if no one cared enough to stop. At work, my coworkers noticed I was quieter than usual. "You okay, man?" one of them asked, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Yeah," I said, "just tired." But it wasn't tiredness, not the kind that comes from work. It was the weight of waiting. That afternoon, as I drove home, I caught myself glancing at the ditch again. The mud had already started to dry, the puddle shrinking back into the earth. The grass was pressed down where my boots had been, a faint reminder that something had happened there, something worth remembering. I don't know what I expected to feel, maybe peace, but instead I just felt connected to that place, to that moment, to her. 3 days passed before my phone finally rang. It was early evening and I was fixing a loose hinge on the porch door when the call came. The number was unfamiliar, but the moment I answered, I recognized the voice. "Hi, this is Emily from Oak Ridge Animal Clinic," she said, a hint of warmth in her tone. "You brought in a ginger cat a few days ago." "Yes," I said, setting down the screwdriver. My heart kicked up a notch. "How is she?" "She's doing really well," she said, and I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Her lungs are clear and she's eating again. We actually just took out the IV this morning." I smiled. That's great news." "She's a sweetheart," Emily continued. "A little shy, but she's been curling up by the window in the rehab room. You probably saved her life, you know." Her words settled deep inside me, quiet and heavy and beautiful all at once. I hesitated before asking, "What happens now? Will she stay there long?" "Well," Emily said, her voice brightening, "funny you should ask. We actually had someone visit today, an older woman who comes by sometimes to drop off blankets and food. She saw the cat and just fell in love with her. Said she reminded her of a cat she used to have. She asked to adopt her once she's fully cleared." I felt a warmth spread through me then, slow and deep, like sunlight after rain. "She'll have a home?" I asked softly. "She will," Emily said. "A quiet home, too. The woman lives alone. She said she's been lonely since her husband passed a few years back. I think they'll be good for each other." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened,
and I just stared out across the field where the sky was glowing gold with the last light of day. "That's good," I finally said. "That's really good." Emily paused. "She's lucky you stopped. Most people wouldn't have." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but I'm the lucky one, I think." When I hung up, I just sat there for a while, watching the horizon fade from gold to blue. The cicadas had started up again, filling the air with their steady rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then silence. I thought about that old woman, about her sitting in a quiet house, maybe with a soft blanket on her lap, and that little ginger cat curled up against her. I could picture it so clearly. The warmth, the peace, two souls that had lost something, finding comfort in each other. It made sense, somehow, like everything had come full circle. The next morning, I drove that same road again. The ditch looked different in the daylight, harmless, ordinary, but I pulled over anyway. I stood there for a minute, listening to the hum of insects, the rustle of wind in the grass. The sun was warm on my face. There was no sign left of the struggle. No muddy paw prints, no sound of distress, just stillness. And in that stillness, I realized something I hadn't before. That sometimes the things we save, the lives we touch, end up saving something in us, too.
It's been a few months now since that afternoon. Seasons have started to shift, the long, warm days of summer fading slowly into the crisp air of fall. The fields outside my window have turned a soft brown, and the scent of dry leaves drifts through the open porch door. Life has gone on in the quiet, steady way it always does out here, marked by chores, coffee cups, and sunsets that never look quite the same twice. And yet, every now and then, when I drive that stretch of road, I find myself slowing down near the old oak tree. The ditch is dry now, the grass grown tall again, hiding the muddy hollow where it all happened. To anyone else, it's just another piece of roadside earth. But to me, it's something else, a reminder. It's strange how moments like that find you when you least expect them. I wasn't looking for anything that day. I wasn't trying to do something noble. I was just a tired man heading home after a long day, same as any other. And yet, in that one moment, something shifted. I remember her small, fragile body in my hands, the weight of her, barely there, the look in her eyes when she realized she wasn't alone anymore. Those eyes have stayed with me, even now. Sometimes at night, I think about her, that little ginger cat in her new home. I imagine her curled up on a couch somewhere, bathed in the warm glow of a lamp, purring softly while an old woman reads beside her. I imagine the peace in that room, two lives that found each other by accident, both needing comfort, both offering it in return. There's something sacred about that thought. People spend their lives chasing purpose, waiting for big moments to give their existence meaning. But sometimes meaning shows up in the smallest, quietest ways, in muddy boots, in trembling hands, in the choice to stop when the world tells you to keep driving. That day taught me something I didn't even know I'd forgotten, that kindness doesn't ask for timing or perfection or applause. It just asks that you notice, that you care enough to reach out, even when it's messy, even when it's inconvenient. I've always thought of myself as an ordinary man, still do. But sometimes in the quiet of evening, I realize that maybe being ordinary isn't such a bad thing, not if you can make a small corner of the world a little softer. I remember the vet's words, "You got to her just in time." I didn't realize until much later that she'd gotten to me just in time too. Because after that day, something inside me softened, the part that had gone numb from routine,
from noise, from the quiet loneliness that builds up in a life that's all work and no wonder. She reminded me what it felt like to care, without reason or reward. And maybe that's the real gift. Every time I see a stray by the roadside now, or a bird caught in a fence, or even a neighbor who looks like they could use a hand, I stop, because I know what can come from a single moment of compassion, how it can ripple outward, unseen, changing lives in ways you'll never fully understand. That little cat will never know my name. It will never remember the sound of my voice, or the way I carried her wrapped in an old towel through the smell of mud and rain. But that's okay. I don't need her to remember. What matters is that she lived. That somewhere, right now, she's warm and safe and loved. And that somehow makes the world feel a little bit more right. Sometimes when I park the truck by the porch and the sun sets just so, painting the fields in amber light, I catch myself smiling for no reason. I think about the way her story could have ended that day, and the way it didn't. I think about how fragile life is, how easily it slips through the cracks, and how beautiful it can be when someone chooses to catch it. Maybe that's what hope really is. Not a grand thing, not fireworks or miracles, but the quiet belief that even the smallest act of care can tip the balance between despair and grace. That day I saved a life. But more than that, that day reminded me how to feel alive. No act of kindness is ever wasted. Sometimes the smallest rescue can heal more than one heart.